everyone, and welcome to the virtual Loscon panel, What It Was Like to Work with Jerry Pournelle. We have Larry Niven, Michael Flynn, and Steve Barnes. And all three of you have gotten to collaborate with Jerry, so. And the reason we're doing this panel is because Jerry was a truly great man, and since this is the first virtual Loscon, we thought we'd do something to tribute our Loscon's first guest of honor, Jerry Pournelle. So I'm going to leave it to you guys to, how do you want to start?
Okay, but you were involved too, Michelle, with Jerry, taking care of him after he had certain medical problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jerry was probably one of my closest friends. I truly miss him.
Yeah.
But I wasn't one of his collaborators, and so this is about you guys.
Okay. Jerry shaped me, and I shaped him to some extent. But he, when his sons were of Boy Scout age, he made me a assistant scoutmaster, and I got to go out and do a lot of hiking that way. We used to drink together and plot stories, and when that became impossible because Jerry had become an alcoholic, we took to hiking instead. Hiking is better. You get the blood rushing to your head, and it generates stories, and the lack of breath keeps you concise. So Jerry was my best friend. He said I was his. He had a way of meeting people that I'd never mastered, and on panels he had to teach himself to get me to talk. I don't interrupt easily, and on a panel it's necessary.
Michael, I promise I'm not ignoring you, Steve. I just figured, Michael, what was it like for you to work with him?
Well, I really couldn't say because we only did one book together, and that was with Larry. The three of us, Fallen Angels. And I was in New Jersey and they were in California, and I had an Apple and they had IBM or whatever it was. And the systems were incompatible, but I think it was the first novel ever written by modem over long distance.
I don't doubt it was the first. Jerry was first with a lot of things.
Yeah.
He wrote the first book on a computer. That computer's in the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
But I never even actually met him in the flesh until after the book was finished. And then my day job took me to Los Angeles one time, and the three of us got together. Now, I had met Larry a couple of times before.
Yeah.
We went out to a restaurant, we sat down, Jerry sat down, and I sat down, and Larry said, "Mike tells funny stories." And then he looked at me and said, "Tell funny stories."
Yeah, I've done that to
make
Steve
your mind
too.
go blank.
Conversation stoppers. I seem to be good at that.
How about you, Steve? Tell us a Jerry story.
A Jerry story. Okay.
Well, you and Jerry's story.
I understand. I would not tell a story that I was not there to witness. And I'd sort of sorting through them and finding.
I can do many of those.
Suitable for a family audience. I guess the best thing I could say is that Jerry intimidated the living hell out of me for years. There was a long period of time where I had the feeling that he was the smartest human being I'd ever met, and he still, there was no time at which he was out of the top few percent. But I started working with Larry on a story called The Locusts, and Jerry came over to Larry's house, and they were drinking Irish coffee, and we were spitting ideas back and forth. And what I had the opportunity to do was to see just how his mind worked. I was observing not what he was saying, but the way he was saying it, the way he shaped ideas, and the way he would pull up ideas from a dozen different disciplines and put them together, and how rapidly he did that, how rapidly he would respond to stimuli. That's I really play around with that a lot when I have an opportunity to evaluate people. And his mind was in some ways an ordinary, really smart mind with a rocket strapped to it. It was really interesting to watch what he did. I would also watch him at the parties that he had at his house, where he would have a room full of world-class minds, and he would go from conversation to conversation and make a really substantive contribution to all of them. And once again, that was another one of these things where I'd never seen that before. But the thing that was the most intimidating was when we were working on Legacy of Hero, the first novel. I'm not sure how many people have ever been in the situation of having two world-class writers sitting at opposite ends of the room, ripping apart their text at the same time. And Jerry would be just chortling about it. He was enjoying my misery. He was like, Barnes, we're ripping up Barnes's precious prose. Barnes, was your mother scared by a gerund? And I would drive home after these sessions, and sometimes I would just be crying. I was in so much emotional pain. But I knew something. I knew something for a fact, that if I could survive those sessions, I was getting an education that there would be no way to pay for anywhere in the world. There was no way to trade money for what I was getting in that room. You had to trade blood. You had to trade sweat. So my price for being part of this was to be willing to let my ego be shattered, so that whatever it is that I really was as a writer would have a chance to come out. I wasn't my ego. I had to keep reminding myself of that the pain didn't matter. Pain don't hurt, as Patrick Swayze said in Roadhouse. So
he taught you flexibility, did he?
He forced me to use flexibility. He was a context in which, if I could not be flexible, I could not survive. If I was to, there are a number of ways in which I would say, that Jerry taught me how to think in certain ways that I think. There are other people who taught me other things about it, but there's a very specific vein of logical thought that I got specifically from playing games with Jerry, from talking to Jerry, from sitting down with Jerry, from defending positions to Jerry, because Jerry would hammer me on certain subjects, and you know perfectly well what some of those subjects were.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. And I had to learn how to survive in that context. And it was a gigantic gift, a huge gift. I would not have missed knowing and working with Jerry for anything. He and I could not have been more difficult politically, but there were some core philosophical aspects that we could connect on in a love of thought for its own sake that we both had, that allowed us to, I think, really, really enjoy each other. And I always enjoyed him and always respected him, and I miss him horribly. And I am so glad that we were able to do that third and final book. I knew that Jerry might not last until we finished it, but it was my way of saying thank you to him. Thank you for all that you've given me, and thank you for what you did to shape Larry Niven, who is one of the most influential human beings in my life. And Larry couldn't, as Larry said, he wouldn't be who he is had he not known Jerry.
Absolutely true.
I loved, I knew that Jerry was going to be something to Larry that I could never be. He could play with Larry in realms where I could not. And I did not covet that at all. I wasn't jealous of that at all. It was just fun to watch. It was so much fun to see the two of them playing, and it was so great. It was such an honor to be included in that, to be playing. It's like, you don't get many opportunities like that in one lifetime. You just don't. So, nothing but love for him.
Michael, what was your opinion when you finally got your first impression when you finally got to meet Jerry in the flesh?
That Jerry in the flesh was like Jerry in the Flash. He was explosive. He had just purchased a new a new car. I forget what kind of car it was, but we got in.
It was
I
a
had to sit-
Chrysler.
A Chrysler? Okay.
Yeah, pretty sure it was the Chrysler.
I had to sit in the back because Larry and Jerry got the front seats. Jerry drove, and he turned around and he said to me, "You want to see what this baby can do?" And then he tried to kill me by going really fast, throwing me around. And I went along with it. I had no choice. I was in the back seat and the doors were closed.
I remember working with Jerry on our book, on your books, Mike, Fallen Angels. The story kept going on, and there was a wonderful long scene that had to be shortened somehow. And we walked on the beach. Jerry and Roberta had a condominium that was shared and in San Diego area. We walked on the beach, kicking sand, throwing ideas at each other, and finally I had the pattern in my head that would allow me to chop the hell out of your prose without losing anything. I remember that sensation very well.
Well, it was an honor just to be nominated.
So what other questions do you have for us, Michelle? You're in that position.
Okay, well, I figured you all worked with Jerry, and Larry said, Michael, did you learn anything from Jerry? I kind
Yes.
of already know everything from you two, so I am focusing a little bit more on Michael. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but the people who are going to be
So
watching
that'll
the
work.
video don't know.
Okay.
Go ahead, Michael.
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
So, like, what do you feel like you
Don't
learned?
write too long.
Right. You, Michael, had a problem finishing a story. You'd fall in love with the story and want to keep it going forever.
I'd still be writing Fallen Angels to this very day.
I fear so. And it would all have been wonderful.
If I were to ask myself what I learned from Jerry that I use most often, other than just certain aspects of logical reasoning, it would be something connected with writing, of course. And it had to do with his theory that if you create the foundation of your story carefully enough, don't be afraid of the problems that you run into. That in all likelihood, if you look at the foundation of your story carefully enough, you will find the answers that you need for the problems that develop later on. And that has been really, really useful to say, okay, we've got this, what seems to be a problem, and rather than walk around it or ignore it or something like that, you go more deeply into the people, the situation. If you've done that right, the answer should be there. And if the answer isn't there, you may not have done it right. So I think that was one of the senses of how do you create a world that seems to be true. You know, in the real world, anything that happens has its origin in something that happened before, because that's the nature of action reaction in a sort of a Newtonian universe. And in a story, if something happens that does not have its roots in something that happened before, where there is no answer in what came before, it's not connecting anything came before, that answer is like a clove stuck into a ham. It's not intrinsic to the story. So, you know, you lay your foundations very carefully and build from there. And as the problems come up, you address them. And you look to the work you've already done. And that happens so many times in working with Jerry that it's definitely integrated itself into my current craft.
So-
We used to play tricks on each other. Once upon a time, he got tired of the electric spark during October, walking down our banister.
Electric spark?
Yeah, static electricity
Oh,
was intrinsic to that banister and the rug that covered the stairs. He got tired of the shock, so one afternoon he's got a $50 in his hand, and he touches his $50 to the metal and points out what he's doing, and goes down the stairs with the charge being drained off. And I walked down behind him, scuffing my feet. He hit the bottom of the stairs, and I touched him on the nape of the neck.
ouch.
Ouch. What he said was, "Arg, you have killed it. You have deaded me." He got me back very cleverly. I'd have to tell a longer story. May I? How do I start this? Yeah, there was an autograph party, and I was there. I was in a mall, in one of those alcove bookstores, facing the hall, and nobody had bothered to do any publicity, so nobody knew I was ever going to be there. So nobody was coming except this one guy who probably wasn't drunk, though I took it for that way. He reads my placard and he says, "Larry, you wrote a book." And I said, "Several, actually." When I wanted to say, "Talk to me, I'm lonely." I came to Jerry's house, which was close by, after that session, and I said, "Give me a drink. I've been through a terrible experience." I told him all about it. Okay, we jump several years, maybe decades. This is a science fiction convention. We're co-guests of honor, something like that. We're due for a panel. I get there 5 minutes early. I get into a conversation and presently realize I'm 5 minutes late. I go in. I say, I'm apologizing. Sorry, I'm late. And Jerry stands up and at the podium and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not the room." I've messed this up. Sorry. I've messed it up. Never mind. And I got to back up for another opening. Okay. First Star Trek convention. I was one of the guests. I come down to the 3 o'clock session. I walk in. I look the audience over. They're all looking a little young. Donahue, the guy who was putting it on, steps to the podium and announces me as follows: Ladies and gentlemen, this is not the room in which the Star Trek bloopers are going to be shown. That room is, and the whole audience stands up and leaves. That was what Jerry remembered. And now at this later science fiction convention, Jerry announces me as follows. This is not the room in which the Star Trek bloopers film is going to be shown. And the audience stands up and turns their back. And I knew just what he'd been telling them.
Oh, no. So, all right, I'm going to ask you guys each individually how you got introduced to Jerry or how you met. Michael, how did you get involved in the book in collaborating with Larry and Jerry?
It was at Nolacon 2. I think it was Nolacon 2.
89? I mean 88 rather?
You're asking me to fit a chronological framework on my memories. And that
I
doesn't
just was
always work.
wondering if it was, that was my very first, if it was 88, it was my very first science fiction convention.
Yeah. My agent, the crafty and clever Eleanor Wood, asked me if I would come to a meeting to talk over a collaboration with Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. And I said, try and stop me. So, I went there and, well, Jerry wasn't there. It was just Larry. And I think Jim Bain was there. And of course, Eleanor. And said, this is going to be a novel with characters based on various people in fandom. How much do you know about fandom? And I said, this is my first science fiction convention ever. Whereupon a look of profound doubt came over the great man's face. But it worked out okay. The first time I met Jerry was actually over the internet, over a modem. They didn't even have internet back then. It was Genie. And we met in writing. We didn't meet face to face. So these two guys have all these great personal stories. I don't have those. I just have text. I'm a text only kind of partner.
Doesn't make you any less. I was just gonna say, doesn't make you any less valuable. I'm really grateful that you're joining us and sharing this with us.
If I'm rendered down to my basic chemicals, I'm as valuable as anybody else. More so because there's more of me.
I weigh 225 pounds, Michael.
Oh. I still got you beat.
Yeah. Oh.
Not a race.
Mhm.
Not going there.
Tai
Okay.
Chi. That was where we met. You were doing a Tai Chi class at one of the conventions.
Yeah. I enjoy doing that. I haven't taught one in a convention for, a year at this point. I missed that.
Yeah. It's been a bad year for everybody.
It's true. It's true.
So Larry, how did you, at the very first time you met Jerry, how did that come about?
I don't remember the first time. He was a member of Loscon and he'd show up. What I remember is the Sunday afternoon following the first BoucherCon, the first detective story convention. Jerry and I were sitting together having lunch, I guess, and in a crowd, and Jerry suggested collaborating. And that sounded like fun because I'd done it with David Gerald, who was a wonderful partner if you like being amused. And I do. Anyway, David and I had collaborated. Jerry and I um, began a collaboration, a conversation on on yeah. We set up a meet, and it was an evening meeting. We sat around that evening, and I taught Jerry to pour brandy into his coffee. Probably a mistake, but it seemed like a natural combination. You stay awake and you go crazy. Uh, we designed the entire Modi race with histories and a dozen uh, varieties, species. Uh, we we did it all in that one night, and I've never felt as much a writer uh, since then. I take it back. Every time I've really felt like a writer, it was with Jerry. We were invited to write an ending for a movie called A Watcher in the Woods, and we did most of our writing sitting in Jerry's hot tub with snifters of brandy floating in front of us. You really feel like a Hollywood writer when you do that. And we've been on trips that were exploring trips for research trips for books. For the book I started myself and later got Jerry involved. The Burning City. We took a trip up the hemp road, or rather the grapevine, as it is now, to explore what it must have looked like 14,000 years ago, when magic still worked and was wearing out. It's one of Jerry's uh, very, very rare fantasies. We for the sequel, we drove all the way to the center of the country, the Great Divide, and then back, stopping at any place that looked magical, including the petrified forest. Anything that looked magical went in as magical, according to the rules I set for myself. Times when I felt like a writer. You'll remember this one, maybe, Stephen. Uh, we we were working on the legacy of Europe, and Stephen had brought his text. We were going through it. Jerry says, I was doing the writing. Jerry says, we need to notice here that that Cadman's wife's uh, uh, not up to speed in the intellectual department. She's dumb because of there was ice on her mind. She didn't survive the frozen part of the trip. And I said, okay, I've got it. Jerry says, what we actually need here is, and I said, it's okay, I've covered it. And he says, Stephen, you got to see this. All I had done was have her repeat a question as if Cadman must have missed it.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah, it wouldn't have worked in real life at all. We're constantly repeating questions because another person might have missed it. But in fiction, it doesn't happen because we're concise.
Well, you're concise.
Mystery novels have, you know, that there aren't going to be scenes that mean nothing. So you got a finite number of potential suspects.
Yeah, there's that. At any rate, I really felt like a writer when that happened.
Steve, how did what describe your first meeting with Jerry? How did you guys meet?
Um, I would have met him. Basically, what was going on in my life at the time, I was working at Pepperdine University, and I was writing and I was selling stories and getting like a fifth of a cent a word, or being paid in contributors copies, stuff like that. So I asked a friend of mine, I said, where can I find some real writers, people who've actually done it? Because a huge amount of my life, if I want to know how to do something, I'll find somebody who's already done it, model their behavior. And I'd never had a chance to really sit down and talk with a real writer. So he said that Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle hung out at the Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society, the Losses up in Burbank on Thursday nights. So I went up there, introduced myself to Larry, and started a conversation, so forth there. And at some point, I met Jerry at some point during that, who seemed to be a very larger than life presence. I was probably introduced to him at that point, but it wasn't until that first night going over to Larry's house to work on some aspects of that story, The Locust, that I really had a chance to observe him at close range and interact with him with any intensity. So that would have been the first moment. Larry and Jerry drinking their Irish coffees.
Well, Michael, what can you still write? Correct? You're you still.
I would like to think so.
Would you like to talk about a couple of your recent projects? I don't remember ever seeing you at Loscon, so this is a chance for a new audience to get to know you.
I don't think I have ever been. I was at a Worldcon in Los Angeles, and I read this. This may be apropos because they had a special panel with Larry, Jerry, and me, and we were supposed to explain how three people can collaborate together. And the answer is, of course, excellently. But they had written. Now, I don't know if it was Jerry or Larry, but they had written for Fallen Angels some character sketches, as well as a couple of plot elements and so forth. And I was supposed to do the rough draft, throw a bunch of clay on the potting wheel, and then they would use their vast experience and so forth to make it actually good. And somebody comes up in the line to get autographs, and I look at her, and she somehow seems familiar, though I'd never met her before. And one of you two, either Larry or Jerry, leaned over and said, "Don't you recognize her?" I looked some more, and I said, "It's Shireen, who is one of the characters in Fallen Angels."
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
either Larry or Jerry had described the character so well that I immediately recognized her, even though I'd never seen her before in my whole life. Now, I don't know which of the two it was, but that taught me something about developing characters.
Steal them. Get them from real life.
That's true. Which
Dare them
reminds
to
me,
sue.
you would ask me what I was doing right now. I have a short nonfiction article that I don't know what to do with, called Adventures in Myth History, about the difference between what the primary sources say and what we really think happened.
Cool.
I have a novelette that I just finished, and it's sitting around right now steeping, so I get to read it again in a while and see if it's still any good. Sometimes you don't age well. It's part of a series of lost colony stories called The Journeyman. When I get enough of them, I'll try to put them together like a book. I also have a novel, which again I just finished, but That's set in the alien world of 1967 Milwaukee. And it's science fiction due to the fact that there's a insane, immortal Danish barbarian running around. And some historical researchers figure that out. And he doesn't like it if you figure that out. So I just finished it, and again, that has to sit until I read it again. Because I had started it before the stroke and just recently finished it after the stroke. So I don't know if the thing holds up as a whole. And I just got a contract to write a novel for a generation starship. No faster than light travel allowed, all that rest of that stuff. And I figured I didn't want to do the usual cliches where they get to the destination and somebody got there ahead of them with FTL or something. And I didn't want to do the cliche where they forget they're on a ship. So I'm playing it straight. And I'm going to apply Aristotelian political science. That's the hard science for the story. But it's a 1,000-year trip, which I figure is long enough for all sorts of political developments on board the ship.
You'll be criticized as an elitist.
Oh, heavens. I've always wanted to be an elitist. They
Good.
would never let me in the door.
Me too. I didn't have the nerve.
Don't let the criticism stop you. I want to read this.
So do I.
Mhm.
One of the reasons you write is to find out how it turns out.
Yeah.
One of the things I had the pleasure of is driving Jerry around and getting to all those times when we were driving, it's like I got to hear his entire life. He was one very fascinating character.
How did
It
you
was,
meet
yes.
Michelle?
At Loscon. I mean, it's just I was another member, but can I tell? Do you guys mind if I tell the story about how I think I got his respect?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, Steve, Larry, you know that he would periodically at the Loscon meetings get up in front and pontificate.
Yeah.
Jerry?
Yeah.
Never.
He would get in front of the club and start lecturing or talking about something, and we called it pontificating, or everyone else did.
We call it moment of science now. And
Mhm.
Jerry isn't here to do it, but several members are people who
Yes.
catch weird things happening.
So Jerry was talking with us. I think it was about this was at least 15 years ago. And we were still arguing about global warming and was it man-made, and he was going on and on about the the what science has proved is wrong. And and I listened. I had stuff to say that was the opposite, but I want to be respectful. But I was in the back of the room and I just raised my hand, waiting, letting him continue. And when he called on me, that's when I what and I told him what I thought he was wrong, and I explained why I thought he was wrong. And that's what he respected, was the fact that I backed up my statements. I wasn't angry at him. I wasn't telling him outright. I was explaining why I thought he was wrong, and that earned his respect. He doesn't mind people disagreeing with him as long as you actually have facts to back him up. And since that time, we started becoming friends. He would go out of his way after the meetings to walk me to my car. It was just, he was very much a gentleman. Okay, Steve, what was the moment where you think you earned Jerry's respect?
If I don't think I want to tell that story.
Okay,
Quite honestly.
fair enough.
but I can tell, let me see if I can think of a moment that that I realized. I mean, over the period of time that we were working on Legacy of Heroes, there were a number of times when Jerry felt that I'd come up with a good idea, or I had developed an idea well, or I had written something that he thought, that worked. And so I watched that respect growing. So on a professional level, that was definitely there. He would come at me in arguments about certain subjects, and I would never back down from it. I know he respected that as well.
You don't back down, but you can change your mind.
Yes, sure, absolutely.
Yes.
There any number of people have taught me things. I mean, you taught me more things than I can count, Larry. And Jerry, I learned much from. So it's not a matter of Jerry. I'll tell you one of the things that Jerry taught me how to argue with somebody smarter than me, which is a very useful skill.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, it's all mixed up in there. I think that it's just a matter that over a period of time, people see that you are consistent. That is who you really are, as opposed to a mask that you're wearing. And I think that Gary appreciated the fact that I was consistent. I may not be the smartest guy, I may not be, the this or the that, but I'm who I am, and I've really tried to be a sincere human being and present and to dig into myself and to be the best person I could be. I think Jerry appreciated my efforts to be consistent and to be the best person that I could be.
Yeah. You were learning, and it was lots of fun to teach. For him to, lots of fun to teach Stephen or anyone else.
Michael, were you a new writer, or I'm sorry, I probably should have looked up your stuff a little bit better before I started this, but back when you wrote with Larry and Jerry, did you feel like they taught you anything?
Yes.
Michael at least had a reputation enough to have gotten Jim Bain's attention. Jim Bain set up Fallen Angels.
Okay.
I think at that point, I'd had 2 Hugo nominations for novellas.
Oh, well then.
And
Yeah.
I'd been
Did you
appearing
teach them anything?
fairly regularly in analog. And I had 1 novel out, In the Country of the Blind, which my brothers always said would have sold better if it had been called In the Country of the Blonde.
No one says we have to go the whole hour. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about, or should we wrap up?
Hell, I love Jerry Pournelle. I miss him a lot.
Yeah.
He formed a large part of my life, and we've mostly been talking about the writing. It wasn't just the writing.
Okay, you know what? That's a good segue. Let's talk about some of the personal stuff. After you met Jerry, did you do any social stuff with him, Michael?
No, there was a whole continent between us.
Okay.
And I didn't get out to California all that much. And one time, he was the guest of honor at a short-lived con in New Jersey, which happened to be right up the road from me. And, we hung out together and talked some. But we didn't meet often enough to become close associates. We did talk at one time or another about writing another book together, but nothing ever really came of that. He wanted to expand on a short story, Kenyans to the Keep. But that didn't gel. And there were 2 other books that sort of got a little ways and then sort of petered out.
We hiked. We sailed, we sang, we drank together. Uh, we learned, we lectured each other. It wasn't just you, Steve. We lectured each other. Jerry would lecture me on how civilization was fallen, and I would point out to him he's on a freeway. That kind of thing.
How about you, Steve? What kind of social stuff did you do with Jerry?
Well, anytime we got together to work, we would go out to eat. And so, eating was always that. I had a chance to go out to his condo at the beach where we were working on one of our novels. And we had playtime there. We were able to go out and body surf and fun stuff like that. And there were a couple of times that Jerry and I got together by ourselves when we were working on a project and Larry wasn't available. And we would once again hang out there. And then of course there were tons of parties that we would encounter each other at, either Spanish parties in general or parties at his house or parties over at Larry's house, in which we would have a chance to interact socially as well. So I got to see him in a lot of different moods in a lot of different ways. And, he was definitely that larger than life quality that I picked up on, about from him was true. He'd had, he was a man with a high level of skills in multiple areas who knew a little bit about almost everything and a lot about, the areas that he had a tremendous amount of interest in. So, one of the things that I would do is find out how his mind would work when confronted with new information. So I wanted to differentiate. I wanted to see what was the difference between the way he could think because he had that information on tap and the way he thought when he was integrating new information. That was always fascinating to me. And one of the things it taught me was the value of the Catholic school, the Jesuit education that he'd gotten, where his mind was shaped and organized so that all that information was easily available and easily cross-referenced. There was, because although his mind on a native way, as far as I could determine, was extremely fine with a prodigious memory. What made him so unusual in terms of how well he was able to function was that he'd gotten a really solid education that he was then able to build on over a lifetime. So it wasn't just the fact that he came out of the box with a lot of computing power. It was also that the programs that had been given to him, what he'd been programmed with, was extremely fine and very well considered. So he was both. He both had a lot of innate potential and had been crafted very carefully.
He was a character.
Yes, he was.
It was really fun hanging out with a truly, truly great man. It really was. It was just, remember when we all went down when Larry was guest of honor at Comic Fest?
Yes.
That was a fun weekend.
Yes. I was that was the only comic fest I've been to. They had a room, a suite of rooms set up to mimic the Draco Tavern, and complete with Chirpsitra, complete with storytellers on stage, acting out some of my stories. It was a great ego boost. I reveled in it.
Steve got us tickets to go see Gravity, and you had a panel at that time, Larry. So, and we invited Jerry to go with us, but Jerry wanted to see your panel, so it was just Steve and I. And then
Okay.
I'm going to cut that story short right there.
I've seen Gravity. I may not have had as much fun as you did because I was just alone.
So it's more fun to see movies with friends.
Yes, it is. I can remember back that far.
We will have it again. Although, virtual reality, some of the Oculus Quest thing, they're actually movie theaters where you can invite your friends and watch virtual movies together. I haven't done that yet, but it sounds a little crazy. It might be fun. That you can actually watch movies and the avatars of your friends are sitting next to you eating popcorn. It's just like, okay, we're getting a little taste of the future there.
I think I'd still would prefer being in a theater with my friends.
Oh, absolutely. It's just that when you don't have that option, it's better than nothing. We played
That's
virtual
true.
golf with my daughter a couple of times, and it's virtual miniature golf, and it's hugely better than nothing. I mean, it's like no comparison. It's not the same as actually being able to hug them
Mhm.
and see them, but it's
You know,
you do the best you can.
that's going to actually be really good, because when we do get a city up on the moon, a moon base, and the first city on Mars, be able to still interact with family that's across on other
Yeah.
parts of the universe.
Well, from the moon, you've only got a couple of seconds time lag. Mars would be a little bit more difficult, I think.
Yeah.
Not that big a time lag. It's an 8-month journey, but it's only a couple of light minutes away, maybe a minute or
Well,
so.
it'd be kind of hard to play games, at that kind of chess maybe, but
Um,
Is
we're
there any lag when you play with when she's down in San Diego?
not enough to notice. I'm sure there's
Okay.
lag, but you don't feel it because she's whatever satellite they're bouncing it off of or whatever it is that they're doing. It's it doesn't. Susan Fox says it's 8 light minutes at the least, twice that at opposition. So yeah, you're not going to have a conversation, in real time like that. But with Nikki, it felt wonderful.
mm,
I missed my baby.
She misses you too.
Hope so.
I missed her last time we met. We had a chance to meet,
Yeah, I
and I
know.
guess it's going to be a while.
Yeah, maybe we can work that out. Maybe who knows? Maybe we can get you an Oculus headset and we can invite you for miniature golf, Larry.
All right, I'll play with you.
Okay, we will put that on the because I know that she would love to. I think you would enjoy that. We'll have that conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, guys. It is just about 8:30. It's time to wrap
All right.
things up.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending our panel, and please subscribe to our channel and like the video. And also, if you want your Loscon gear, there's link down below for Teespring. And thank you to Krypton Radio, Sci-Fi for your Wi-Fi, and Susan Fox for hosting us. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye
Bye-bye.
to Michael.